Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on 4 ways to streamline submittals and maximize accuracy. I'm Holly Gibson, a Senior Product Specialist here at UDA Technologies, and I'm so excited to have you join us today. Joining me for today's webinar presentation is my colleague Jordan Davis, also Senior Product Specialist here at UDA.
Hello, everyone.
And again, we couldn't be happier that you've joined us today for this what we hope is a very informative session on really how you can maximize accuracy and streamline your submittal process. Now, if you're new to UDA Technologies or ConstructionOnline is our award-winning project management platform based completely on the web, with over 750,000 of you all over the world managing over $80 billion in projects every single day. And many of those projects, especially for those of you that mix in commercial work or really large-scale residential projects, we know that that does include managing that submittal process with not only your internal team members, but external team members as well. Of course, delays can be caused by inaccurate communication. So that's one of the things we want to focus on today is how you can maximize accuracy and really streamline that submittal process.
Yeah, that's right. We're really excited to dive in and show off exactly how you can use the tools in ConstructionOnline to manage the submittal process. Holly, I actually had the great fortune of working with one of our clients earlier this month. And one of the topics that we really drilled into was, well, how do we keep up with the volume of submittals that we're working with? I kind of had a chance to preview some of the tools we'll be showing off today. One of the biggest questions was, there's going to be some revisions back and forth. How do we know who we're waiting on, what's coming up next? And we really think that the tools in ConstructionOnline and have shown, at least working with this client, that the tools definitely can help keep you on track and making sure that you're receiving responses from everyone involved in the process.
Absolutely. And we've actually added some enhancements recently to that submittal process that make it even easier. So we're really excited to show off not only the process as a whole and how that's really going to be better than other ways you might have tried managing this in the past, like maybe an Excel sheet, but some of the new things that we've added in. So as we dive in today, some of the topics that we'll be covering will be, first of all, of course, that submittal creation process, how to make submittals in ConstructionOnline, how to assign approvers and responders, and how to use the brand new dynamic due date for responses. So really cool ways of managing sort of that date and that sequence with the new dynamic due dates, in addition to due dates that, of course, you can just assign. We'll also look at how to quickly see balls in court, including fast ways for you to see which submittals are in your court, and really a quick way of knowing who's next in the workflow for any specific submittal. We'll also talk about the difference between sequential and parallel workflows and when to use each one, what the best use cases are for those, as well as how to see all of the upcoming response dates, statuses, approvers, responders, and really all of your submittal information in the brand new enhanced summary table. So we've made some really nice enhancements to that to make it even easier for you to see what's coming up.
Now, as Holly and I work through the topics today, if you have any questions at all, we'd really love for you to send them our way. And you can do that using the GoToWebinar panel. If this is the first UDA Technologies webinar, welcome. We really love to engage with our audience as we work through. If you look in the GoToWebinar panel, you'll see a section titled Questions. If you click on the little arrow next to that, it should open up and allow you to find a space where you can type and send questions our way. Again, if this isn't your first rodeo as well, hello and welcome back. We'd love to hear your questions as we work through as well. No question is too much of a beginner question, and no question really is too much of an advanced question. Just send them our way. We'll be looking through those questions, and we'll spend some time at the end of the presentation today to answer your questions. Now, without further ado, let's get started.
So let's jump in. As we start to take a look at submittals in ConstructionOnline, those are going to be part of the communication tool set that's available for you in your project. So what we're looking at here is my Summit at Smith Square Phase 2 project. We have all sorts of things going on here. You know, ConstructionOnline is really your one central hub for all of that project information. So we've got things like, our budgets and our change orders and our schedule, but what we really want to focus in on today are those submittals. So to go there, you'll just head over to the communication section of your project, go ahead and select submittals, and we'll be able to dive in and start creating and working with this information. Now, as we take a look at this project, I do have a few submittals already created for us to look at, just so we can kind of see what that starts to look like as you add more information to a job. I know that many of you are managing 40, 50, 150 submittals for each project that you're working on. And so one thing that we like to look at with ConstructionOnline is how to make management of all of that data easier. And that really starts with the actual creation process. To do that, of course, we're going to just go ahead and select Add Submittal and start walking through what it looks like to create those submittals for your team.
Now, right out of the gate, looking at the new submittal window, I kind of like to point out this is a really great way to standardize the submittal creation process for the entire team. Now, the submittal that we're going to be creating is a hybrid of a couple of different elements that companies would traditionally use to put together a submittal. First, you're working in some type of Word document processor to actually build the submittal and type in the description and the details and maybe put together some of the attachments appended into the document. That takes a bit of time, and we can really cut down on that with the new submittal creation tool here. It also is going to standardize information entry, and in a lot of cases, it's going to replace or really supplement your email inbox, or really just your email client of choice to begin with. What we've found, or what I've heard from a lot of companies, is that especially when they're working through a submittal process and they want to improve it, something that can fall by the wayside is standardization and reporting internally. Now, that's not a huge priority right now when we're putting our first submittal together, but it is something really great to think about when a team is really starting to use and really starting to roll out ConstructionOnline. Now, you can see Holly's moving through and giving the submittal a title. This almost serves like a subject line in an email, but also serves as the title for the submittal itself. We can see that this is going to be submittal number 12. Now, if we were starting with a brand new submittal, of course, it would start with number 1, and then, of course, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. ConstructionOnline is going to automatically number the submittals for you, which, if you're trying to keep up with your submittals in another system or trying to keep up with it manually, well, if you slip somewhere, that could lead into some confusion later on as well. And you can see there are a number of fields that this, really isn't necessary for the submittal we're building today, but could be great for filtering or reporting purposes later, like being able to assign a specific trade to the submittal, so we can actually pull a report potentially to see all of our, let's say, MEP submittals later on, or maybe we wanted to drill down and see specific cost codes, pulling a report for those. It's really simple to set up and enter throughout, and that's really the key we're going to be seeing as we move forward in building this submittal. Now, the description field, this is going to act almost like the body of the email or other document that you might put together for the submittal. This is also going to send out from the system to whoever we designate as an approver or a recipient of this submittal. A couple of questions that will come my way will be, okay, well, what are some of these other fields, like the CC field? What is this used for? Well, it really is similar to email. This is where you can copy another contact. Maybe they're not exactly involved in the approval process, but you want to keep other people on the team in the loop about submittals and really the status of submittals throughout the entire process. Adding people into the CC field makes it really easy, and it cuts down on the number of emails you have to forward to people later on as well. Of course, we have a few extra fields like the received date. If we'd already received certain documents or pieces of information from subcontractors, for instance, we could designate, well, when did we actually receive this? That way we can log it for later, documentation, tracking down when did we actually receive this.
That's such a great point. The submittals tool in ConstructionOnline is designed to handle a number of scenarios exceptionally well. Now, the scenario that we'll be walking through as we create this submittal is one in which Jordan and I will sort of play the role as perhaps a general contractor here and coordinate information coming in from other parties. So we'll look at that. However, ConstructionOnline submittals are designed to really well handle other scenarios. Like, for example, in the example you're giving here, Jordan, what if we've already received the submittal and we just want to log further approvals? We could do that here. Or if we're a subcontractor and we're the one who needs to submit this information, maybe what we're really wanting to do is produce a document. It handles that really well also. So there's all sorts of ways that we can use this. So when you look at the different fields and pieces of information that are available to you here, cost, impact, drawing numbers, locations, fill out what's useful for you. In most cases, you will always need a title and a submittal type. You can do some great, reporting off of that type as well. As we go to our next step, we're going to get into sort of the workflow of each submittal. So we're going to look at some options for really assigning out approvals and responses. And we'll have a chance to show you here some new options for due date. Now, a typical workflow might be, for me, that the first thing that needs to happen is I need to have my subcontractor actually submit information. So the submitter here at the top is intended for that purpose. So our submitter is normally going to be our subcontractor. In this case, we're going to say that it's going to be Steve Allen here. So we'll go ahead and assign Steve, and I can give him a due date. So I need him to submit this to me by, let's just say Wednesday of next week. So we'll go ahead and give him a date. The next piece of our workflow is going to happen, what happens after our subcontractor submits this information. So we'll start to look at then who else needs to be involved in the process. Now, I know often a workflow that I see really frequently with customers I work with is that once it's submitted, it will often come back to a project manager or submittal manager internally for a quick review before going out to others, maybe an architect or someone like that. So let's say that, next step would be, I need to review it, and then, we need that to go out to our architect or our engineering team. So we'll go ahead and select that. Now you'll notice with each one that I add, I get a new blank spot, so I can really continue adding those approvers or responders, as many as I need to here at this point. So again, it works really well if you have just a simple, quick review process with a couple of people. It works just as well if you might have, 3 or 4 people that need to be involved or even beyond in that approval process. Now, in terms of assigning out due dates for your responders, there are really 2 ways to do that. The first way would be to go ahead and just assign a static date to each person. So in this case, I might say that we need this submittal from Steve here by the 5th of August. Maybe I know that I need to have it done by the 7th. Maybe I've got a 48-hour turnaround or something like that. And then once it goes to the architect, I want him to respond, say by the 12th. Maybe I've got a good contract with him. Maybe he's got his 14 days. There's all sorts of ways that we could do this here. So again, very flexible. Jordan's laughing at me. I know it's usually longer than that, Jordan. But we've got some examples going. So the point is, you can come in and choose static dates that you can assign for due dates. Or you can actually take advantage of our new days to respond mode, which really gives you the ability to take advantage of kind of tightening up that submittal process as much as possible while still adhering to, the correct number of days that each person is supposed to have to approve it once it comes their way.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Now, this approach is actually very simple. Now, one thing you'll notice is that you have to have some type of start to the system, and that really is going to be the submission date. If you're not using a submitter, then really the system kind of kicks off from the day in which you would assign in the very first piece. But in a more simple example here, what we're going to do is we're going to enter in the number of calendar days that the person has to respond. So at this point, let's say that, we do want a 48-hour turnaround time, so we'll just say in 2 days. That's really how long we have to respond. And then once Holly has submitted her response, maybe we'll give our architect here the 14 days, maybe 10 days if we want to try and tighten it up.
That's right. And this could really keep going. Again, if we had additional people that needed to be involved, we could really continue to add in, those approvers and, assign them a time frame. So what this is going to do, though, is it means that from the time I receive the submittal it can stay in my court for up to 2 days. That's kind of my deadline, and it's going to create due dates for me based on that. The advantage to doing it this way, especially with a multi-step approval process, is that, if I need to have 2 days and then our architect needs to have 10 days, my due date assignments would have to reflect that. I would have to kind of set the due date at the latest possible date. But let's say that I go ahead and actually receive this submittal from Steve well before the 5th. Maybe he gets it to me by the end of the week. Now the system knows that I have 2 days and my due date is adjusted accordingly. I can go ahead and, log my response or make my approval. And then at that point, ConstructionOnline knows that, okay, now it's moved to the next person's court and they now have the 10 days. So it actually really helps to tighten that up while still, respecting those contracted periods of time.
Yeah, and of course, it really does do a great job of reducing the amount of time in which people have. In a way that is still, considerate, but also prevents that, this isn't due until the 14th, so I'll just wait until the 13th to take a look at it. Which, if you're working with professionals, probably won't happen. But even the best professionals can, receive a mountain load of work they need to process. And keeping people in the loop and reminding them both, through the system and also the automated reminders it'll send out based around these response dates will do a great job of keeping people's attention on what, is most important for the project.
Exactly. Now, as we close out creating this submittal, our next step is to pull in any attachments that we want to be a part of this. So you could really, this could be anything, a photograph or a PDF document or, a spec or a drawing, whatever you want to attach here. And then our next step is going to be to set the status of the submittal. Now, typically when we create these, they're going to be, either open or perhaps draft. So what open means, and this is going to be the most common, is we are creating the submittal and it's ready to be released for review. We're ready to kind of kick that off right now. If you need to set up a good number of submittals, and I, again, I've worked with a lot of people who kind of like to go through and get all of these submittals set up in the beginning. You can use the draft mode. What this is going to do is get everything set up and created in your submittal log without sending out any emails or notices, at this point. Closed would typically not happen until the end, although I will just note here that, if some of you are just kind of logging this information, you can just log it and go ahead and close it out. But normally open is going to be what happens. You can choose at this point to just create the submittal and log it, or go ahead and create and send emails, which is normally what you'll want to do to initiate that approval process. So we'll choose that option, and now our new submittal has been logged. I can now see in my breakdown that I have 6 submittals currently awaiting response, none where I've received all responses posted and I haven't reviewed them, but 1 that I have been able to review and go ahead and close out.
And that's that. That's really all that you need to do to create a submittal inside of ConstructionOnline. Of course, you'll want to make sure that you know who you're sending the submittal to ahead of time, but if you don't, that's not an issue as well. That's really where the draft status comes into play, so that you can go ahead and build out, as Holly was saying, your draft submittals. And once you do receive, or let's say once you do close on a subcontract, you can go ahead and release at that time the submittal to the person in question, and go ahead and start gathering the documentation, specs, other things you need to move forward in the process.
That's right. Now our next, the next thing we want to cover is really how you can use this information to quickly see balls in court so that you know who's next in this submittal workflow. So, when you think about managing this process, one thing that, clients that I work with will say, this is just part really of their weekly meeting. They'll print up the submittal log. They'll go through and look at, who are we waiting on? What is this? What's going on for this week? And so we want to give you a really fast and easy way to see a couple of different things here. So as we look at our submittals, I can, select any of these and see the details, who the response is pending from, kind of a quick summary of what we have going on. But we don't want to have to go through each one of these just to get that information. So there's a couple of quick things that you can do. Over on the summary page of your submittals, which you can think of this as your submittal log, you are wanting to look really for these little green it looks like tennis balls. So like little green balls that are going to show us whose court the ball is in right now for that particular submittal. So it's one of the first things that will display for you when you're looking at your submittal log. You just really want to look for who has that beside their name. So I know that for, this facility control submittal here that I am waiting on Ian. I know that for this one I am waiting on Michael. So it's a really fast and easy way to see whose turn it is, whose court this ball is in for each of these submittals that I'm trying to manage.
Yeah, it's a really quick and visual way to not only understand what you're waiting on, but also who you might need to get in touch with. If you haven't received a response, maybe you've just passed the due date and you want to make sure, well, is everything okay in the situation? Now, a second way that the ball in court idea or the ball in court status really can help you is to understand what's waiting on you, or what's waiting on me in this case, or what's waiting on Holly in this case.
That's right. So you can actually activate your ball in court filter here within your submittal status breakdown widget. And what that does is it just filters out your submittal list and only displays those submittals where the ball is in your court. So if you need to come into the submittal listing for any of your projects and see really quickly what needs your attention, so what's waiting on me right now, what do I need to review, using this option is a great way to be able to come in and just really quickly see, okay, what needs your attention so that you can go ahead and focus on those items.
And that's really all there is to it. Now, our next topic is to cover the difference between sequential and parallel submitter approval workflows. This is a fairly common question when people are first creating a new submittal inside of ConstructionOnline, because, well, it's one of the first options that you really have in terms of customizing the submittal, and the question comes up, and once you understand, it is a very straightforward idea. But in this case, let's go ahead and start making a new submittal.
Yeah, definitely. And it does affect that ball in court. So when you think about, whose turn it is with the submittal, how you set up your approval process is going to really impact, how that ball in court is read when you're looking at ConstructionOnline. So we want to make sure that you're choosing, the right one for you. So let's just go with, filling out our title here. Again, at this point, you can come in and really choose, okay, what type. We'll keep it kind of brief for this one, but you can fill out whatever you need. But when we get to this next step, our submitter and approvers, you'll notice that you have two options here. So you have a sequential approval workflow and also a parallel approval workflow. How these differ from a practical standpoint really is kind of about that ball in court. So with a sequential approval sequence, of course, our submitter is always going to come first, by the way, in both of these. So if we are using this submitter field, if our subcontractor needs to submit this information first, then that is always going to be number one in your approval workflow. If you choose not to use it, then of course this is just skipped over. So we'll go ahead and assign that out. And then take a look at a couple of the other workflow options that you have. So with sequential, you'll notice that there are numbers beside each contact's name. And this is just, sequential means they're going to go in sequence. I need the rest of this approval process to happen within a specific order. So if we're thinking about the example that we used earlier, I need to go next. That needs to be me. And then I need to have my architect go after that. It definitely needs to go in this order. Sometimes, though, we might want to have multiple approvals happening, but it doesn't really matter which order they're in, and that's really when you'd want to use that parallel approval process. So you notice when I switch over to this option, the numbers go away here. What this means is I've got multiple approvers, people that I need to respond, but it really doesn't matter what order they go in. I just need everyone to review and approve for me.
Yeah, just to submit their response, right? Now, rough rule of thumb that I've found works really well for this is if you would typically pass through a PDF that has some type of stamping process that people need to go through, you probably want to make sure that that's a sequential approval process. If there's just some type of documentation that needs like an okay or a quick review from maybe the design team and maybe like like an interior design consultant or someone like that, and you really just need everyone to say, yeah, I saw this. That's when the parallel approval process tends to make more sense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, just because you have everyone approving whenever, you probably still do want to set a respond by date, just so that everyone knows that, well, just because it's not sequential, we do need some sort of review or response on this.
Right. Definitely still need to have a deadline, so you can go ahead and assign those. And then the rest of the submittal creation would be, exactly the same as it would be for a sequence. So we would just add any attachments, double check our status, go ahead and create and send that out. But what you'll notice is as we sort of look at this submittal, right now Ball and Court is our submitter, so that's going to be Ted. Once he enters his response, or I receive it from him, and we'll just go ahead and respond on behalf of Ted. Now, do know that what really is happening next as these are going out is that, your subcontractor will receive an email letting them know that their response is required on this submittal. They'll be able to log into the TeamLink portal, upload those items for you, go ahead and respond or approve on the submittal for you there, and you'll see those responses come in. If you happen to have a team member that has just maybe responded to you directly by email or something like that, you can post on their behalf as you're collecting those in. We'll go ahead and do that right now just to get this response logged. And what we'll notice in the summary here is that now the Ball and Court is shifted to both of these approvers because they're not necessarily having to go in sequence. At this point, we need an approval from both of them, so that's what we're going to see here.
And this is a really great transition into our final topic, which is really making the most out of the summary table. Now, the summary table not only shows you, of course, the title and the number, but it also gives you a lot of very interesting information, really acting as a total dynamic log of all of the submittals inside of the project. Now, starting from the left, we're not going to go through every single column because that would just put people to sleep, but some highlights here would be especially looking at the number and the revision column. A pretty common question, or something people try to track down, is, well, what is the most recent, or what's the most important submittal that I should be paying attention to? Well, it is, of course, the latest in a series of revisions in a lot of cases, because that's the one that's probably going to be requiring the next step or the next action. If the submittal is closed out, which you'll be able to see in the status column, then you can pay attention to it for review. But really, there's a lot of activity and a lot of action surrounding open submittals in a lot of cases. And being able to not only sort the table by the number, but also being able to see the revision number can help you quickly zero in on exactly which submittal you should be paying attention to. Now, as we look across, some other things to pay attention to, of course, would be the date in which you sent the submittal out, and any response due dates. This is going to do a great job of keeping you in the loop on upcoming submittals. You can even sort the submittal table by response due dates. And you can also start to track and see when people have submitted their response and what their response status was. Now, looking at submitters, well, they're really only going to have one status, and that is submitted or pending, or two statuses, I should say. This is really helping you keep track of, well, who are you waiting on for their documentation or materials or whatever it might be. But of course, moving past that, once you actually move into the review and approval process, you can start to see all of the different response statuses that could be logged inside of ConstructionOnline. Some of the more common ones, of course, would be approved. We're looking at some other response statuses, though, where especially when next steps would be required, like revise and resubmit, for instance. That tends to be a pretty common response from what I've seen in earlier revisions of different submittals, and that is a signal for you to go ahead and just take the existing submittal and maybe step through and generate a revision, which couldn't be easier. All you would need to do is either select the menu or just right-click on a submittal that's maybe marked for revision, and from that point you can begin the creation process again, except this time you'll notice ConstructionOnline is going to automatically number and title and tag this new submittal as a revision to the existing submittal. It's a very, very simple process.
It is very simple. Now, a couple of other things to note about your submittal log as it's created here. And you can see, we can really easily see I've got a 13.1 0.1, so I know I've got a revision on this one. As we go through and look at our statuses and dates, one thing to note is that your date sent really is going to reflect the date the submittal was sent. So this won't always be the date the submittal was created, but when you think about those due dates that you're assigning and the parallel or sequential workflows that you're choosing, this all impacts the day that that ConstructionOnline is going to actually send out the submittal to that recipient. So you want to be able to see, what day did this go out to Jordan and Michael, and what is their now response date based on that? When is that response due? But then you can also see the date that they've actually responded, once they go out of pending mode here. So it does help you really see, where you are in the process. And of course, you can also see all sorts of other, kind of useful pieces of information. But I find that this section here, where I'm looking at ball in court and my, dates sent and received, are really, really helpful. Now, one thing that you can do with your submittal log is, of course, view it here on ConstructionOnline. We really recommend, we love when teams get, a nice, large screen to go in their meeting room. We've had a chance to visit with so many of you on site or at your offices, and often we'll see, teams with a big, TV in their conference room, something that they can bring ConstructionOnline up on. But of course, if you do want to get this out in a report that you can distribute at a meeting, there are a couple of ways to do that. You can export the submittal log to Excel, or you can print the submittal log within your communication report section. So if we wanted to just print up this submittal log, be able to distribute that at a meeting, give everyone a copy, they'll be able to see all the information that you're seeing here in ConstructionOnline.
Of course, something else really interesting about the submittal log would be some of the different filters that you have available, both in the report and also back in that summary table we were looking at before as well. So if there's a particular trade or a particular, let's say, approver that you're looking to pull a report on to see, well, this person is constantly costing us time. Look, this architect's taken, on average, let's say, an extra week past the due date to submit their responses. We're constantly trying to chase them down. Well, you could actually use that information, to defend your company or to point out to people, look, this has become a problem. Or in the reverse, you could look through and see really specific information that you're trying to track down for your team. Let's say you're on the go and you're at a job site. You're able to pull this table up and drill down and see if someone asks a question about, let's say, some HVAC work that needs to be done. Well, you can go all the way back and look at all the submittals relating to HVAC. If you've done a great job of tagging, of course, on your submittals, which really doesn't take that much time.
It doesn't. That's the benefit of just filling out the form. Go ahead and fill out as much information as you can. And it does go back to that consistency, Jordan, that you mentioned. It's kind of just a roadmap for creating that successfully. So it's easy to just fill out the form, but then there is a lot that you can do with that information. Now, one thing that I wanted to touch on as well as we sort of look at this management process for our submittals is, what does the rest of the workflow look like? So we're here looking at, how to do things like, kind of look at the data as we're looking for responses to come in. How does this actually get closed out? And so what we would normally be looking for is a situation where all of our responses had been received. So if you look at your dashboard here, our status breakdown, I have 8 submittals awaiting a response, 0 with all responses posted, 1 that has been marked as closed. What our expected workflow would be is that they all start here, we're awaiting response. Once everyone in that workflow has responded, it's going to actually show up here. And you can actually use these, as filters, so you can kind of engage those and be able to see. What we would expect to happen here is that then there will be like a final closing of that submittal. You kind of look, you verify that you do have all the responses, that everything looks good, and then once that's done, then you can actually go ahead and just close out the submittal. And then once you have closed it out, and really to close, you're just going to right click and go ahead and close. So like that part of it is is super easy to do. And then you've got some options, kind of beyond to go in and look at, well, okay, which ones are actually closed at this point.
Yeah, this is actually a question that came up when I was working with a client a couple of weeks ago. They were wondering, speaking of closing, what should we do when someone submits a response that says, reviewed or revise and resubmit, right? That kind of breaks the chain of responses. It really doesn't need the next approval in series, especially if your architect posts and says, well, you need to revise and resubmit, here's why. And they submit their feedback. So in some cases, you might not actually reach a point where the submittal has every single response posted because it doesn't need it. In this case, what we've recommended is to just mark that submittal as closed and then spin out a revision for that submittal so that your team knows, well, the previous submittal stopped at this point from this response. We've moved on now to our next phase where we're gathering the next materials of the revision, right? So at this point, it needs to bounce back out to, let's say, the subcontractor to revise and resubmit whatever it might be. And at this point, the process kicks back down the line again. And this could happen 2, 3, 4 times.
Right. Or it could be as well that, like when that submittal is closing, of course, and that this is a good example of when you maybe would and wouldn't want to send emails. When you close a submittal, you can choose to go ahead and send a summary email to everyone involved upon closing it out, just kind of a confirmation that this submittal has been closed. So you'll normally choose that. If you were closing it with the intent to, create an additional one or a revision, you would probably not choose to, to send those at that point. But our goal would be to kind of move the submittals left to right into this closed status here, in terms of just, kind of that overall workflow.
Yeah, that's definitely the goal. Now, Holly, I think at this point we have covered the topics that we were hoping to share today. At this point, thank you all so much for joining us. We're not going to wrap up just yet. We are going to spend a few minutes in a question and answer type session. So we're going to give you all a couple of minutes to send some questions our way. We are ready and waiting.
It looks like there's a couple of great questions that have already started to come through here. One is just, can you print, a submittal? Like, what does the submittal form look like if you print it up? And you absolutely can. So any of these submittals, in addition to printing like a submittal log or exporting a submittal log, you actually can just go ahead and print like an actual submittal. So like if we wanted to just do a quick print on this one, you can choose to go ahead and print all of them, by the way. So if you needed to print up all the submittals for a project, it would generate a pretty lengthy PDF, but you could do it that way. We'll just leave it on this one to show you guys what it looks like, and get that printed up. But you can, print the submittal. It's a great document that you could then, either print out or just download or save this PDF and use it for other purposes. So great question.
Yeah, sometimes what I found is that companies want kind of like a finality to a submittal, let's say after it's gone through a couple of rounds of revisions. A really great way of handling this would be to generate a printed version, quote unquote, of the final revised submittal with everyone's responses, basically saying, yes, we did this, right? We finished it out. What I've recommended and what makes a lot of sense in this case is to actually save this document back into ConstructionOnline as a PDF for your own internal records. And then what I've seen companies do to great effect is to use the transmittal section inside of ConstructionOnline, or the transmittal feature in ConstructionOnline, to act as like a certified message to say, this is the final document, this is sent for your information. Is a great option to check to say, what's the purpose of this transmittal. And then they'll actually attach the ConstructionOnline file just to serve as that final message that says, we did this. We're done. That
final stamp there, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, if anyone has any issues with it at that point, well, at this day or at this date, it's already been really signed and sealed and delivered through the transmittal section.
Exactly. Now, it looks like we've got another great question here, just related to, what does it look like from the outside team member perspective or experience, so of course much of what we're managing here, and that's a great question, a lot of what we are managing here is not only our internal team but external team members, subcontractors, engineers, architects, other people that need to be involved here. So, we kind of looked at when we're creating the submittal, you have the option to, of course, create and send emails. So that's going to send the email out their way. When they get that email, they'll have like an option to like basically click here to respond to the submittal, and it will bring them into their portal. So normally they're going to be assigned as a TeamLink member. If it's an owner or owner's rep, they would normally be assigned as a ClientLink member. In both cases, they'll be able to see their submittals, and you can manage those assignments here in your team section for your project. So for example, Ted Bishop, we have him assigned to a couple of our submittals. He's part of my TeamLink contact here, so I want him to be able to respond to that through the portal. Now, just to give you guys an idea of what that looks like, you actually can preview that from ConstructionOnline. So we'll just go ahead and preview and show you, like what does this look like from a subcontractor perspective. Now, in this case, I do have, a good bit of information turned on for my subcontractor here. So there's a good number of options that I've turned on for them. They are able to see, submittals that are assigned to them, the ones that are in their court. And if you go actually into the communication area for submittals, then I can see here, what that looks like, which isn't much different than what it looks like on your side, a little bit more streamlined, but they'll be able to see the submittals that apply to them, which ones need their attention, and can enter their comments, upload attachments, and go ahead and submit their response here.
And they also have the option to look into the summary tab as well. Of course, if they're seeing the submittal here, chances are they were either waiting for them, or they had submitted their information earlier, especially if they're a subcontractor on the project. But this is also a place where design teams, architects, engineering consultants, and such, will log in and view as well. Now, the balls in court filter we looked at earlier also comes into play on this page, so that people can drill down and see what actually needs my attention. Now, we understand that if you're working with extended teams, that sometimes it's tough to get them to do really much of anything. It's almost a coin flip. But we've worked really hard and have had really great feedback and response. At least I have personally. I've worked with external design teams that I've had training sessions with, and they take all of 5 minutes to really learn how to sign in and get it done.
Yeah. Same here. I think that the submittal process as part of ConstructionOnline is something I usually get really great feedback for. So for teams that are needing to manage the submittal process, and there's normally, there's an expectation that on these types of projects, there's an expectation that this will have to be done and managed. So like this is, normally I don't see quite as many barriers to extended team members logging in. They really expect to need to do those things. This is also giving me a chance just really also to talk about one other enhancement that we added recently for submittals as related to subcontractors, is the ability to actually choose to show all closed submittals to your TeamLink members. So you have the option with submittals, and when you're setting up your ClientLink or TeamLink settings, you have the option to go ahead and of course turn that on so that they can view and respond to submittals that they are assigned to. But we've actually recently added an additional option to make closed submittals visible to all subcontractors, regardless of if they're assigned to it or not. So we had actually had some great feedback from a couple of you guys out there who are really using submittals so heavily and so well, wanted a way to be able to kind of have those finalized submittals, kind of like you were talking about a moment ago, Jordan, have those finalized submittals just available for the entire project team, kind of regardless of assignment. And so you do have the option now to make all of those closed submittals visible to all subcontractors or owners on the job. So that's another nice touch for your TeamLink members that's been added recently for that submittal process.
Yeah, especially as the scope and scale of a project increases in nature, and as the teams themselves grow, and needing to assign people to each submittal just to show them finalized, and especially for review later on as well, is a huge improvement. And of course, that in combination with the filters for the trade section can really help your subs filter down and find out all of the details, all the data that they need to be successful, both on and not in the field.
Yeah, definitely. Now, we've got another question here coming in from someone that I think maybe has been following along with us during the workshop today, who just asked, how do I get back to where I can see all the submittals regardless of status if I hit one of these boxes in the breakdown? So great question. And these are... they basically serve as toggles. So if you've selected one of these and want to deselect, you can just click it again and it will clear that filter right off. So pretty easy to turn those on and off. And that's really our goal. We want to give you some filter options, but also make it really quick and easy to kind of switch back and forth between different things you might want to look at here.
Speaking of filter options, that also somewhat applies, at least in a roundabout way, to the filters drop-down menu in the platform as well, which you can actually click to expand, and this lets you again filter down and see, well, we want to find just the mechanical options. Once a filter is actually set, though, if you wanted to clear that, there's an option to clear the filters that appears right on the page. Now, what's really interesting is these the status breakdown toggle switch at the top and the filters do stack on top of each other. So you can filter to see only submittals awaiting responses, and then from that subsection, you can see all the submittals awaiting responses for TED or for the trade, for a specific trade. All right, another really interesting question. In a sequential submittal review process, how often does each party receive email notifications? Did they receive an email every step of the review process, or only when the ball is in their court? Really great question, and it's almost a two-part question. Because the way that the system will work, if you assign a submitter, now remember that field's optional. This is a question that comes up from time to time. If you set someone inside of the submitter field, the only person who will receive that submittal at first is the person who you're waiting for a submission from. So in this case, if we put in, so we have Ian set, for instance, as our submitter, well, no one else is going to be notified of this submittal because, well, there's nothing for them to review yet. So at this point, we're really just sending out essentially a request for them to submit in a real way. Once that person has submitted their response, the submittal will essentially be released to the next person in series, but only that person. So to prevent people later on in the chain from receiving and essentially throwing off the actual submittal process. This is a great way to keep the approvals sequential and making sure that the stamps are landing in the right places on your submittal, let's say, documents as you're moving through. Now, the parallel approver process, of course, I know that you didn't ask the question, but it kind of acts in the exact opposite way. Once one person has submitted their response, the system is going to notify everyone else in the approval process that this person submitted their response. It's kind of a nice motivator to kick people into actually submitting their response as well. Really great question. It seems fairly common sense, but also, if you haven't really used ConstructionOnline submittal process, you're not too sure, and especially if you haven't been on the receiving end, you're not too sure how that's going to look. Now, what is really great about the responses in kind, or the responses after the first approver, is that the people later in the sequential series will be able to see all of the previous responses. So if someone submits a response that says, revise and resubmit, the next person in the chain is going to see, okay, well, the person before me said that they need to revise and resubmit, so I'm going to table this one. I probably need to wait until it's my, until we actually have something to work with.
Exactly. Now, it looks like, I think that might wrap up most of our questions for today. There's a couple of others just kind of regarding some of the prints and exports, but I think we've hit on all of those questions as we've gone through. And those are really great tools, by the way. I think that ConstructionOnline does a great job of giving you reporting off of this information in addition to, kind of managing the sequence. So we hope that you've learned a lot today about how to use ConstructionOnline submittals and how to really streamline that process. Before we close out, I do want to invite all of you in attendance today to join us next week as well. So we have a webinar. Of course, we try to do these workshops for you guys regularly. Next week, we'll actually be covering what's new for summer 2020. So if you guys are ConstructionOnline customers for a while, you know that we are always working for you and adding enhancements and fun new tools and features into ConstructionOnline for our clients. And this summer has definitely been no different. We've got improved file sharing, imports for checklist and punch list, branding messages for your leads, some really great document customization options that will be coming your way next week. So all sorts of wonderful things that we'll be covering, just a roundup of what's new. I'd love for all of you to join us for that and see some of those new tools in ConstructionOnline. And then of course the following week on August 13th, we'll have an estimating workshop, 5 steps for more accurate financials. So would love to see you at both of those.
That's right. And of course, as always, thank you all so much for spending the time to learn from us today. We always learn quite a lot from you. If you have additional questions or things that we didn't cover today that you'd like to learn more about, please feel free to reach out to us here. We're here to answer your questions and help you become more successful managing your business, your projects, and really helping you achieve everything that you set out to achieve. Well, at least as far as we can help. Otherwise, I hope you all have a great, we all hope you have a great rest of the week. Have a fantastic weekend, and hopefully we'll see you in our next webinar.
Thanks, everyone.